What's up, guys? Thanks for joining our Intro to Boxing lesson. This lesson is for anyone who wants a review, whether you've been a beginner, intermediate, or advanced boxer. This is great for review into the basics of boxing, and also good for beginners who maybe have been intimidated to get to a gym, or you're quarantined and you can't get to a gym. So this is good at-home practice. That way you could build some fundamentals before you take these to a boxing gym or a fight gym. Anyways, let's get started. What I'm going to do is take you guys through some basic boxing fundamentals. We'll go anything from stances to movement, ending with a couple punches, and then we'll talk about how to link them. So that's going to be our game plan. So starting off, let's just get into the basic stance. If you are a righty, typically you want your right hand in back, and if you're a lefty, you typically want that left hand in back. So I'm going to talk about this as if I am a righty, which I am, and then if you are a lefty, just do the reverse of me. So if I say take a step back with your right, you would actually take a step back with your left. So starting it off, I'm going to take my feet and get shoulder width apart, just right under my shoulders. And I'm going to take my left leg, my front leg in this case, it's going to take a half a step forward. My back leg will take a half a step back, and I'm going to take both of my feet and I'm going to turn them 45 degrees. This is going to be the basic staggered guarding stance. A good way to check is I have a line between my heels. My heels are, I could bring my back heel into my front heel, and that's going to be the start to my guarding stance. The next part we'll talk about is just the depth of your guarding stance. A good check is going to be your knuckle to elbow distance apart. So if you see from a side view, if I'm in a side guarding stance like this, I want to have my elbow inside of my knee and my knuckles inside of my knee. This kind of tells me where my guarding stance is and how comfortable I should feel. Ultimately, this is your guarding stance, so you can have a little bit wider or a little bit closer, but no extremes. I'm going to start like this. I could be a little bit out like this. This is totally fine. I could also be a little bit in. This is totally fine. But we don't want an extreme like this, and I don't want an extreme like this. So keep your guarding stance roughly a forearm distance apart. That's going to be my stance. Just like any sport, we keep our knees bent. I highly doubt you could think of any sports that have your knees locked out and extended. So have a soft bend in your knees, comfortable stance, and just begin to learn how to transfer your weight from your front leg to your back leg. So that's going to be the very first part. You could do this with just a shift in weight. Get my weight to my front leg, get my weight to my back leg. Front leg, back leg, front leg, back leg. Even without my hands up yet, because we haven't talked about that yet, just feel comfortable doing this. Front leg, back leg. Once you feel comfortable with that, add a little bounce to it. Front leg, back leg, front leg, back leg. Just nice and easy. Just get comfortable here. Notice I'm not flat-footed stuck into the floor. I'm kind of lifting up my heels. I'm nice and light on the balls of my feet. And here, nice and easy on the balls of my feet here. Nothing too crazy, just a comfortable bounce. So that's the start to our foot part of our guarding stance. As far as our guarding stance with our hands, I'm going to start with my back hand. One way to know what position you want it to be in is take your hand, raise it straight up in there, and bring it straight down till your ribs stop you. From that point, what's going to happen is I'm just going to have my hands float right in front of my face, my mouth area. We'll call this the mustache area, right where your mustache is. Have that hand hanging out. My other hand is going to be staggered in front, so I don't want it up against me. I don't want it really far away from me, but just a comfortable staggered, which you'll notice is I have my front hand ahead of my back hand, just like this. This is a basic, just staggered stance, guarding stance. Putting that together with my feet, my heels are in a line, my back hand and arm is up against me and at my mustache area, and then my hands in front just like this. Now feel comfortable just being in this stance. Move from front leg to back leg, shift, kind of get your weight going from your front leg to back leg. You feel good with that. If you'll see from the side here, I'll just kind of shift my weight. I'll add a bounce to it. Nice, easy front leg to back leg. Just get my weight going. Front leg, back leg, front leg, back leg. You could do this in one spot. You don't need much space at all. Just nice, easy bouncing here. And that's our basic guarding stance. We're always going to refer back to this. So everything that we're going to do, we'll get back into our guarding stance. We'll attack from there and on and on. So moving on from basic guarding stance to how to actually move. This is actually going to be the most important part. If you could get movement down, all the punches and everything else will come together. But it all starts from your feet. Even though we think boxing is a punching sport, which in a sense it is, it's dominated by your legs. So if your legs are not tired as you're boxing, if your legs aren't listening to your hands, if they're not communicating with your hands, you're defeating the part of boxing, the most important part of boxing. So if you can think how dominant your legs are in boxing, you'll actually have a step ahead once you start getting into a gym. So let's move it on now. Let's talk about movement. Good thing about movement is there's nothing here that is really meant to confuse you. The simpler, the better. What I mean by that is if I want to take a step forward towards my opponent, I'm going to step towards you guys here. I'm going to step forward with my front leg first, and then the back leg will match. And that part is very important. That's probably the most important detail about this whole thing, is my feet have to match each other. If I take a big step and a little step, you guys are going to notice how weird of a guarding stance I'm in. Likewise, if I take a little step and a big step, you guys are going to notice that my feet are not in my guarding stance. So they have to match. If I take a little step, this takes a little step. If I go medium step, this one goes medium step. Same rules apply when I travel backwards. If I want to go backwards, my back leg takes a little step, my front takes a little step. If I go medium, then this one takes a medium. Notice how they're matching. I'm doing everything I can to maintain this distance. So if I go 1, 2 and check, I completed that step. How I know I didn't do this correctly is if I do something like this. Step, step. If I check now, clearly I'm not in a good guarding stance. So I maintain my stance. I maintain my stance. That's front and back movement. As I step to my lefts and my rights, again, nothing here should or is designed to confuse you. The easy way to remember this is the direction you step is the leg that goes first. So if I want to travel to my left, in this case this is my left here, I'm going to step with my left first. Take a little step, this one matches. Little, on and on and on. So what you'll see again is if I take a little step, this one takes a little step. If I take a medium step or a big step, this one has to match, getting me back into this distance of a guarding stance. Very important that you guys get this down when you move side to side. They're all equally important if I go forward and back, but very important that I do this side to side, and here's the reason why. If I take a little step here, but a big step here, I'm very off balance right now. My feet crossed up. If you guys were fighting me, this would be a green light to attack me. Right away, you should have a green light to go and hit. If I go the other way, if I go to my right and I step with my left first, what you'll notice is my feet are crossed up. I'm not in a good guarding stance. I can't attack from here, and I would get hit. This would be a green light for you to attack. So how we avoid that is I showed you guys the left side, stepping left. Now I'm going to show you the right side. From here, if I step to my right leg moves first. I take a little step and a little step. Medium, medium. And now just kind of play with those distances. You know how to move forward. You know how to move back. You know how to move to the left and to the right. Play with that. Move forward, back, left, right. Then get your bounce going. Move forward, move back, move to your left, move to your right. And just feel comfortable with that. So a good warm-up drill, if you want to pause the video right now, just pause the video and then just play around with moving. Bounce, move around to your forward side, move towards your back side, move to your right, move to your left, and just practice this. Get in a guarding stance. You don't have to be so jumpy. You can move around here. You can move around here. Or you could get a little bounce to it and move. That's totally up to you. But I would take some time to feel comfortable in that guarding stance. So that kind of wraps up our guarding stance and movement. What we'll do now is kind of switch gears to some punching. All right, so now that you have your guarding stance down, that's going to be our most important fundamental or our most important foundation. And from there, we're just going to build and tack on things to become a complete fighter. So with that said, the first punch we're going to learn is a jab. Jab is going to be our fundamentally most important technique from beginning of your rounds to the end of the fight. You have to maintain a good solid jab. This is going to make sure that your opponent respects your distance, respects your power, your strength, and speed. So that's going to be the reason you want to maintain that. As we progress through the jab, there's going to be a couple main things that we're going to focus on, but once you get the jab down, you will see that it will relate to your other punches. So starting off, jab is going to be from our guarding stance, and this is going to be your closest hand to your opponent. So if I'm fighting you guys, this camera here, this would be my jab, my front hand closest to my opponent. If I was in a different stance, this is now my jab, the hand closest to my opponent. So make sure that your jab is not really a left-handed punch or a right-handed punch. This is more of a front versus backhand strike. So in this guarding stance, breaking down the jab, the best thing you could do in the beginning is to, in a sense, tie an invisible rope around your front hand and your front leg. And they do have to travel together. So as I throw my jab, what you're going to notice is my foot will step with that punch. They have to be working together. They have to communicate together in order to have an efficient punch. So I don't want to step and then punch. I don't want to punch and then step. This has to be tied together. This has to move together. But let's actually break down the hand positioning, the arm positioning, and everything else with this jab. As I throw this punch, what you're going to see inside of my gloves, my hands are going to be relaxed. I'm not going to be tensed up the whole time. Your glove has this natural arc. Just keep your hand open and relax like this. As I go to throw the punch, I step with my punch at the same time, and my hand is open, 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 open. Right when it connects, that's when it will close. It's going to be a tight fist. To ensure that your fist is in a good position, imagine that you have like a roll of quarters right on the base of your fingertips here, or on your fingers, or a pen or something along those lines, and you're going to roll it tight in, make a strong fist, and then take that thumb and tuck it under your second finger. So down here at the bottom, I'll tuck it. Very important. This is the most important part about our fist positioning, is do not tuck your thumb inside of there. Your thumb should not be in your hand. If you're going to punch, you're going to really damage that thumb up. So my fist gets tight fist rolled in. My thumb, my boxing glove won't even let me stick my thumb out. But if you're hitting without a glove, bring that thumb right to that second finger here. That'll make your tight fist. The part of the hand we actually hit with is going to be our two biggest knuckles. I'm going to hit with the front top one and then my middle top one here, poking these out. And what you're going to notice is they're in a straight line to my arm. That's why we're hitting with these two big knuckles. If I hit with the small ones, my wrist tends to bend. Hitting with my top ones, this is fully aligned. We call this joint stacking, where my knuckles are in a line with my wrist, which is in a line with my elbow, which is in a line with my shoulder. And I'm punching straight down here. Other part is something cool to think about, or something, just a cool example, is imagine that your hand is actually a shotgun. And as I throw this jab, I'm looking straight down the barrel of my shotgun right now. I'm looking straight down the barrel, and then in between these two knuckles is my sight. And I'm looking straight down that sight here. My other hand, my non-punching hand, is up, and it travels back just as fast as I threw it out. It'll travel back just as fast, if not faster. No hanging out here, out and back. So let's break that punch down a little bit smoother. Here in my guarding stance, and as I work this, my hands are up. I'm going to step on this jab, and we're going to throw out and back. Again, out and back. And that's just breaking down my basic fundamentals of this punch. As we get our gloves on, we'll talk about actually striking with the gloves and hitting something. So now that we have our gloves, the rules stay the same. Nothing changes. We just have a glove on to protect our hands. I still want to hit with my two biggest knuckles, and we're going to talk about jabbing something, jabbing a bag, or hitting someone in general. We're going to maintain those same fundamentals we talked about, but the key on this punch, when you actually start to strike, is to not push. And you're going to notice, I've seen this before, where people think that as the more they get the bag moving, the stronger or better their strikes are. And in fact, that's completely wrong. So what that looks like is this. If I go to push my punch on a jab, I got the bag to move like crazy. However, that wasn't a punch, right? I didn't actually hit something. So instead, what I want you to do is focus a little bit more on whipping and snapping. I like to visualize this hand being like a snake bite. It snaps out and back. I'm in my guarding stance, just like we talked about previously. I step with my foot, I punch at the same time, and I keep my non-punching hand up. So when I throw this jab here, I connect with my two biggest knuckles and back. I push off the floor, I step with my foot as I jab here. When we're here, one more time, I push and snap. Just getting that will elevate your boxing, because what you're doing is you're not pushing your strikes, you're actually hitting. There's a solid strike. The other thing it does, the pro to that, is it gets you back to defense fast. If I punch and hang my hand out for a while and bring it back low, I'm completely open. Just as it was important to step and punch, it's important to bring my hand back. And I want to snap that out and back as fast as possible. So again, if this means you need to pause the video and practice your jab, take some time, practice the jab. If you're doing this in the air, practice this in the air. If you're doing this on a bag, practice on a bag. Tie what we talked about together. Move around. If I step forward, move forward. Step back, step to your left, step to your right, and make sure you're planted before you throw your punch. I don't want to be off balance when I throw my jab. I don't want to be falling as I throw my jab. I'm planted, I throw the jab, and I'm back. And we move. I'm moving, I plant myself, and I'm back. All right, we're back, and back. On and on and on. So take some time, practice your jab, get that down, and then we're going to move on to our next punch, which will be called our cross punch. All right, so now that you have your jab punch down, we're going to move on to our next basic punch. This is going to be called our cross, also known as a backhand straight. Typically, you'll hear it referred to a cross because you're going over the top of a hand or you're crossing another strike. Or you'll hear it called a backhand straight because that's what your backhand is throwing a straight punch. Very similar and will follow a lot of the fundamentals of our jab, but the difference is we're adding a twist, which we'll call a pivot, instead of a step. On a jab, we did a step. On a cross, we'll do a pivot. And what a pivot is, what I want you to let's talk about the importance of the pivot, is this is how we create power. If you could think of any sport, in order to create power, usually the hips are involved. And this is how we're getting our hips involved into this strike. So as I kind of break down this pivot, I want you to think about why we're doing it, and the ultimate reason is to create power. As I do this, from my guarding stance, a pivot, this part's very important, I do not lift my heel high off the floor. I barely lift my heel, and then I turn towards the front. I twist, and I'm back. And the reason I said that's very important is because we want to maintain a good connection to the floor. I actually want to twist into the ground versus come up off the floor. So you'll actually notice my weight sink versus my weight lift. And that's how we utilize the ground for power. So I'm pushing off the ground, and I'm using the ground to throw my punch. My hands are just an extension of my body. My body turns, my hand throws, that's going to be a cross. So now let's break this down in a little bit more detail. From my guarding stance, I'm going to initiate all the power from the floor. It's going to travel up my leg. I want a good connection to the floor here. If I have a bad connection where I feel like I'm off balance, your cross will suffer. I want to get that energy from the ground. It's going to come up my hip, and then when I twist and I pivot, it comes out my hand, right? So that's going to be our cross punch. Now everything else, what you'll notice, it follows the fundamentals of a jab. My hands are up, non-punching hand up near the face. My chin is protected by my shoulder here. It's down and tucked, and I'm looking down this barrel of my shotgun here. Notice how I'm aiming with my two biggest knuckles, and as we mentioned earlier on the jab, is I joint stack. I have my knuckles that are aligned to my wrist, aligned to my elbow, aligned to my shoulder. I'm not flaring my punch in any way. It's a straight line shot and back. Backhand straight and back. And together what you'll notice is, like I said, my hands are tied by a rope. I twist and punch at the same time. I don't want to punch then twist. I don't want to twist and then punch. Together. They move together, out and back. Out and back. That's going to be our basic cross punch. Once you have that cross punch down, now we're going to apply this to actually hitting something. So, like I said, anytime you hit anything, our strikes and our technique does not go away. Everything follows the same rules. The only difference is we now have a glove and we're now hitting. The only focus point that I really want you to break down as you're hitting is we're actually striking and not pushing. So now let's show how that looks like when I hit a bag here. So as I hit with my cross, in my guarding stance here, I follow the same rules we talked about. I pivot, I punch while I pivot, my hand comes out and comes back in a straight line, and I am aiming with my two biggest knuckles. Power is not going to come from lifting a lot of weights, doing a whole lot of push-ups. It helps. I mean, there's definitely a benefit to it, but our power will come from the utilization of our hips. So if you're utilizing the floor, utilizing our hips, you will feel power when you throw this punch. So let's break this down. I get myself planted. I'm not off balance when I punch. From a good, solid, comfortable position, I twist and back. I twist my hip, I throw my front shoulder forward, and I throw my back shoulder forward, and I throw my front shoulder back. There's a twist here. All right, I'm twisting on that punch. So as you get that punch down, or as you start to play with your cross, make sure that you're utilizing your pivots. You're hitting with your two biggest knuckles, and you're going in a very linear straight line. You don't want anything to flare. I don't want my punch to flare and then hit. I want this hand to go in a straight line and back. Straight line and back. So take some time if you need to pause the video to break down your crosses, punch some stuff, get your cross down before we move on to anything else. Good work, guys. So you just made it through an intro boxing lesson. You learned your guarding stance. You learned how to have your hands up. You learned how to have a jab. You learned what to do on a cross. Like I said, for my lefties, you're taking everything that I'm talking about and you're just reversing them. So when I jab with my left, you would jab with your right, and on and on and on. So overall, awesome job. I want you guys to feel free to pause, go back. If you're an advanced student, maybe I said something in this video that I haven't said in a while, or anything along those lines. Hopefully something clicks here. But the last thing I'm going to leave you guys with is whether you have a bag, or let's say you belong to a gym and you can't make it. Feel free to shadow spar at your home. You could do this at any time. Anything I talked about in this class, you could practice with or without a bag. So if you don't have a bag, let's talk about what that looks like. Whether you have some open space or you have a basement, garage, anything, you're just moving around. If I don't have anything to hit, totally fine. I still practice the same stuff. I move, my hands are up. I practice stepping on my jab. I practice pivoting on my cross. If I throw the two together, I'll go step, pivot. And I'll just move around like that. Move, throw 1-2s and move. Practice your jab, practice doubling. Practice jab, jab, cross, bum, bum, bum. Maybe go jab, cross, but practice any of these. You could still utilize all this information without a bag. If you do have a bag, break this down. Practice everything we talked about. The big thing on hitting a bag is not to push, snap your punches, and remember, this is very important. This is the last thing I'm going to leave you guys with. Power will come. Power happens from throwing a correct technique fast. So if you guys want to hit the bag with some power, that's awesome, but make sure that you have good technique first. Injuries happen when you throw an incorrect technique powerful. So I throw, for example, a cross, I flare like crazy, and I throw with a lot of power, boom, that's when my shoulder starts to feel it. So before you force power, make sure you have good technique. So I'll leave you guys with that. Anyways, this is Coach Stan from Mastering Martial Arts. I hope you guys enjoyed this lesson, and hopefully I get a chance to teach you guys some more stuff.